Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're going to get started right away since we have such a short lunch hour. My name is Cameron Finch, and I am the book publicity director here at Atmosphere Press. We thank you so much for taking time to join us virtually today for our free webinar on book publishing in 2023. You'll be hearing today from our illustrious guest speaker, award-winning author, and Atmosphere's Director of Acquisitions, Dr. Kyle McCord. He'll walk you through the publishing process and what it's like to be the author of 7 books published by 4 different presses in 2 genres. You'll learn from Kyle's experience taking a manuscript through editorial and design and into the world, and you'll be able to ask him questions about his experience and the author journey. Please do ask us questions, as we want this webinar to be valuable, educational, and meaningful to you. That's really what we're all about here at Atmosphere. We were founded in 2015 by Nick Courtwright, an author and Ph.D. in literature. And Atmosphere Press is the only publisher who puts rewarding and meaningful author experiences above all else. We've published now nearly 1,000 books. Our authors have won dozens of awards, and our books have reached the hands of tens of thousands of readers. So if you have a manuscript of your own, we'd love to read it. Feel free to submit your work by visiting our website, www.atmospherepress.com, and learn more about how you can have a rewarding and meaningful author experience of your own. As I mentioned, throughout this event, we will have time for your questions. So during the webinar, if you have a question for Dr. McCord, please type it in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll try to get to as many questions as possible during this short time we have together. This event will be recorded, and we'll share the recording with all attendees after this event. So you'll be able to go back on your own time and revisit the many nuggets of wisdom shared with you today. With that, I'm thrilled to introduce our guest speaker. Dr. Kyle McCord is the author of 7 books, including National Poetry Series finalist Magpies in the Valley of Oleanders and the novel Reunion of the Good Weather Suicide Cult, published by Atmosphere in 2021. His work featured or forthcoming in Boston Review, the Harvard Review, the Kenyon Review, Ploughshares, TriQuarterly, and elsewhere. He's received grants and awards from the Academy of American Poets, the Vermont Studio Center, and the Baltic Writing Residency. Kyle holds an M.F.A. from University of Massachusetts-Amherst and a Ph.D. from the University of North Texas. He served as Associate Poetry Editor of The Nation and currently serves as Executive Editor of Goldwake Press and, of course, Acquisitions Director for Atmosphere. He is married to the visual artist Lydia McCord and lives in Des Moines, Iowa. Kyle, the stage is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Cam. And it is incredible to be here with you guys today. And one of the things we should do before we get started is, if you're someone who's come here because you have a book or you're in the process of putting a book together, give yourself a little round of applause, right? Because that is an incredibly hard thing to do and incredibly challenging to try and put work into the world. And I know that myself as an author. So round of applause for yourself, of course. And it's a beautiful day here in Iowa. I'm in a good mood. It's the last day of the semester, so I'm done teaching. And so I get to see all of what my students have learned. And now they're thinking about, where do I submit my work? How do I get published, right? I have 3 things that I'm going to talk about today. The first is my personal experience publishing, including my background in academia, what problems I've encountered with traditional publishing, and part of the reason that I really switched over and published with Atmosphere. Secondly, I wanted something different, but self-publishing seemed to me to have some problems. Not a designer, lots of reputation questions. So I want to talk a little bit about the team of experts that I was kind of looking for. And then thirdly, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what my Atmosphere experience was like, and why I believe that I don't think a press could have done a better job for me than Atmosphere did, and also what that means for you, because I'm not just here to talk about myself. So one of the things I want to say is that I'm an editor, okay? But I was an author first. That was the first thing I ever really learned, was how to write for myself. And I think all of us as writers, no matter what genre you're writing in, are really looking not just to get the book into someone's hands, but we want the process to be rewarding and meaningful. And we want it to be part of our legacy as creators. And look, I want to, when I approach publishing, I want to be treated like the artist that I am. And for me, I really started out in the world of traditional publishing. And look, some of this is going to sound probably a little familiar to those of you who submitted books for any length of time, especially to the traditional publishing world. Honestly, here's what it's like. On the one hand, you've got agents, right, who don't respond to your emails, and they are just hunting for the same stuff they've published before. And it has more to do with who the author is than the quality of the work. And look, sometimes you'll get a little feedback here and there, but most of the time what you get is a whole lot of silence, which is so disappointing after you've gone through all the work to put a book into the world. On the other hand, you have the places that are like self-publishing that are almost too vocal, right? And these are places that have all sorts of reputational and quality control problems. And look, they're not interested in your writing. They're just interested in the bottom line in some way, right? And then on the other hand, you've got these small presses that fold left and right. And I was a victim of that myself, right? And where, I had a book I was really excited to see come out, a few months before the publication date. No more press, right? That's so hard to deal with. So in this landscape of publishing, it feels like a huge range of desert with very few oases. And after years in that market with more success than most, I can tell you there are other better options. So when Nick Courtwright, who is, the executive editor for Atmosphere Press, when he started building the mission for Atmosphere, he really focused on building a press that was built for authors, not just so that books could come into the world. And so there's a few things he focused on that we see as being essential to any contract that you're going to sign for your book. Okay. First thing to know is, unfortunately, most contracts are not that great, right? And so there's a range of things that we want to be thinking about. Among them, author rights, right? The actual, like, what is the financial return that you can expect from a contract? Are you betting on yourself, or are you just saying, well, the book will come out and I'll get 10% of the proceeds, 5% of the proceeds, right? We want to avoid those things. Secondly, as the author, you should be keeping the rights to the book, right? You created, it's your intellectual property. You really need to maintain that. 3, as I mentioned earlier, you really need favorable royalty terms, right? One of the things to think about is you don't pay your plumber 5 years after they've come to do work at your house. So you certainly don't give them, you certainly don't keep paying them every time you get a glass of water. That's silly, right? So you need a royalties plan that's going to work for you, where you maintain the majority of it, right? Number 4, you need final say over the contract, right? Meaning that within the actual I misspoke there. You need control over the content, right? So you want to make sure that when you're putting work into the world, you get final say on what happens with it. And then number 5, this might not seem that important, but it's so critical. You need clear, transparent service. So you know who you can get a hold of, who's going to be working on your book, what does the masthead for the press look like, right? And that way you're not, being outsourced to somewhere else where they don't even know anything about your work, right? You want people who are accountable and interested, right? So what I'm getting at here is you need to take control of your publishing future by finding the right team to bring your work into the world. So one of the wonderful things about my experience at Atmosphere was everyone who worked on my book was an expert. I had Alex Kale, who was a pro level editor, knew all sorts of things about the subject matter that I was discussing and had all sorts of great ideas. I had, and I can say this unequivocally, one of the best cover designers working in the industry today. Ronaldo, right? Incredible. Interior design, right? Something people often overlook, but you need somebody who really knows what they're doing, right? And Aaron Larson, who's in charge of our interior design, incredible work. Our marketing team, right? Cam and Hala and all those folks who are putting our books into readers' hands, they absolutely know what they're doing and they understand distribution. I think when I look back on my traditional books, how much better would my experience have been if I'd had things like a digital presence specialist and a huge marketing push behind me, and I'd had someone who was a pro level interior designer putting all my books together, right? And I think one of the things that people often forget about is the way in which you need an expert at each phase of the process. And one of the problems with places like small presses is you don't get that, right? Sadly, right? With something like self-publishing, you definitely don't get that. You're lucky if you get one expert in the whole thing. And then with those traditional presses, right? Oftentimes that's not the case either, because they kind of have one person who really is in charge of your book, no matter how big the press might be. And, with my book, there were some pretty incredible things that came out of it. I got an interview on NPR. That was huge. My book was listed as one of the top 32 books of the year on the Independent Book Review. I got a Kirkus review. That's something that had never happened with the traditional press. And then all sorts of people started picking up work. The guy who optioned Game of Thrones read my book. That's so big, right? And that's just the tip of the iceberg, really, with what's going on with Atmosphere, right? We've had things like, we've had work that was on a Times Square billboard, right? We've had 4 AP books that were Kirkus reviews and the top 100 indie books of the year, which is huge. Love that. We had work that was reviewed in the LA Review of Books. We've won the Mom's Choice Awards. We've had ALA shortlist, book list reviews, all sorts of huge stuff, right? And it's only getting bigger, right? We started out, maybe doing 50 books a year. And we do way more than that, right? Because we have the resources to really bring great work to the fore. Maybe it's your book. Maybe that's the next one coming out with us. And you get 3 guarantees as part of it. The first is you're going to get to keep 90% of the proceeds. That is crazy. That is an incredibly good deal. It's part of the reason that I signed with Atmosphere. I wanted to bet on my own success. I wanted to be the beneficiary of my own work, right? Secondly, you get autonomy. Look, we're going to give you suggestions. We're going to give you all kinds of expert advice. But look, at the end of the day, you get to make the final decision about what happens with your work. And that's so critical. And then thirdly, you get to keep all the rights. So look, if your book hits huge, right? You can reprint, you can excerpt, you can republish, right? You have all sorts of opportunities for you as the writer. So I'd love to hear some questions from you guys, find out a little bit about what you'd like to know. So I'm going to turn it back over to Cam for just a second.
Hey, thanks so much, Kyle. That was amazing just to hear your process as well as, go into more details about Atmosphere. Thanks so much. We definitely have lots of questions from our folks here today. So the first question I'm just going to pop over to you is, there are other hybrid publishers out there. What sets Atmosphere apart from some of the other hybrid publishers that we're talking sort of in that sweet spot between self-publishing and traditional?
There are a few things that are really critical about what goes on at Atmosphere. One that I mentioned earlier is that expertise. Okay, the folks you're going to be dealing with are going to have M.F.As, Ph.Ds, multiple books in the world, right? All sorts of things that are going to help make your book incredibly successful. And when you're thinking about things like marketing, which I know is such a huge factor for a lot of folks, the people who we have who work on those kinds of features of the book, let's put it this way, marketing doesn't start the moment that the book is published. It happens way beforehand, right? So it's happening when we're thinking about the cover design, the interior design, getting everything ready and professionalized, right? So expertise, that's one. Two, reputation. Reputation is huge. Look, if you take a look at some of these other publishers and you look at what they've actually published, I'm going to be honest, it's not real impressive. And if you do sort of a taste test of different books that they put out, you run into all sorts of mistakes in terms of grammar, mechanics, the kind of fundamental bread and butter features that are really going to get your book taken seriously. And then thirdly, in terms of the actual transparency and visibility, one of the things that a lot of these publishers can't tell you is who you're going to be working with, and they can't tell you how much you're going to pay, and because it's all gonna come along late. Oh, it's later. We'll tell you later. We'll tell you later. One of the things we do at Atmosphere, you can see the masthead. You can see who you're going to work with. You can find out a little bit about their background, right? And that kind of transparency is hugely important because it makes a huge difference in terms of the overall quality of the books that are put out and the suite of books that you're going to be among. One of the things people don't often think about is where are the other authors you're being published with, right? And you can go and I can tell you that we are very proud of the people who we put out, whose books we put into the world. Go check them out. That's one of the greatest testaments to what sets us apart as a press.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Kyle. You've got a great question here from multiple folks. Which genres does Atmosphere prefer or represent?
Well, what I'll tell you is we get work in a huge variety of genres, right? So some off the top of my head, children's literature, right? If you're thinking about putting out a book that your kids would like to read, absolutely. Young adult, right? If you have a novel, if you have short stories, if you have a book of poems, right? Maybe it's something that you've been working on for a long time, right? So fiction, nonfiction, you kind of name it, you've worked on it, right? And what I'll say is this, one of the best ways to find out if your book is a good fit, send it over, right? Your work is going to be safe with us. It's not going to be shared with anybody else. It's going to go to our, over to our reading team who's going to take a look at it, right? And so you can trust that your work is in good hands. And again, we publish in a huge variety of genres. I'm just naming, a handful of them. But if you're looking to get your work out there, why not send it over? Find out what the professionals think.
Great. Thank you. It's nice to know that there's a variety and that you take on the project for what it is, not trying to stuff it into a particular category. You mentioned submitting the manuscript. What is the lead time for that, for receiving feedback from the editors? And once the publication process begins, what happens if one needs more or desires more editorial meetings than just the 2 that are part of the contract?
That's always an option, right? You always have the possibility if you say, you know what, 2 meetings was great, but I really crave more feedback about the work itself. That's something that we can absolutely do. One of the things I'll tell you is that I think you will be shocked by what great feedback you get in that first session, right? And I say this as someone who's done, I've been on both ends of developmental editorial. I've been the guy sitting in the hot seat waiting to find out what's going to happen with my work. I've also been the one giving advice, right? And one of the things that people often don't think about is in that conversation, not only do we say, here are some ideas about what we could change about the book or what we can amplify. Sure, that's part of the conversation. But the editor is also going to say to you, here's things we really like. This is great. And this character who you developed, oh, what a rich background, right? It's clear that you really love this. Let's keep that in there. Let's amplify this. And we're going to build on your strengths to help make the book stronger. So alternatively, in addition to if you're looking for more help, or if you say, I feel like my book is kind of there, that's okay too, right? If you send that over, I guarantee you we'll probably have some suggestions for you. We always do, right? But again, you at the end of the day get final say about what you actually want to change about the work. So in terms of lead time, right? We have a dedicated group of people whose job it is to go through and check out the manuscripts and see what we're looking for. We're going to get back to you right away, right? So unlike an agent where you're going to be sitting there for 6 to 8 months and maybe you hear from them and maybe you don't, instead we have people who are going to take a look at your work, and you can set up a conversation with me and we'll talk about what did they think and what was the feedback, and what would be the next steps for putting this book into the world and how would we approach that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Kyle. Wow, we're just rolling along. It's so great that all of you are so engaged. Thank you for your questions. This is a big one. So Kyle, what are the typical costs involved when publishing with Atmosphere? What are the average upfront costs to get a book out with Atmosphere? And could you talk a little bit more also about the royalty split as well, and how that benefits both the author and the press?
All right, it's the money question, right? Let's talk about this. So one of the things we like to do, I mentioned, is be absolutely transparent about what the author can expect. So total to publish with us, unless your book is War and Peace, right, or is incredibly long, what you're probably looking at is $5,500. Okay, and but that may seem like a big number, but we can break that down, right? So to get everything rolling, to get your book started, we only need $2,000, and that allows us to start moving forward with developmental editorial, cover design, all sorts of features of the book that you're going to get to see starting to take shape, right? We also offer payment plans, right? We really want to make this possible for you, to be totally honest, right? And so the way that works is you can put $200 down, and then you can add to it each month, right? And if you have a month where things don't go well, you can say, you know what, I'm not going to add anything this month, but I'm gonna on that next month. That's fine too, right? And again, as soon as we get to that $2,000 mark, we'll get everything rolling. What does it include? Okay, so I mentioned already everything that goes into the publication process. Plus, this is really critical. You are going to get to keep 90% of the proceeds, right? Which is huge, right? That means that instead, where a lot of authors might be getting something like 25 cents or 50 cents a book with traditional publishers, you're looking at $4 to $6 a book, right? That's huge, right? And again, there's some variance in that, but we want authors to be the beneficiaries of their own success. Again, the other thing I'll say is you get to keep your autonomy. How much is that worth to you, right? To me, it's worth a lot, because I really want to be the person who has ultimate say over what happens with my book. And then thirdly, rights, right? Again, you're betting on yourself, right? And that is, I think, the best bet anyone can ever make, right? Is thinking about it this way. It is putting with rights. One of the great things is that the sky's the limit. Perfectly possible that your book could go to a screenwriter, right? That your book could be, something that gets you invited to a conference, right? Something that gets you invited to teach a class, right? That's huge, right? And the kind of opportunities that grow out of that, all of those are going to be yours. If you have another publisher that wants to buy the rights, that's happened more than once, you can absolutely pursue that. So you get a huge number of ways to pursue the success that's going to come out of your book.
Amazing. Great. Thank you. Thank you for answering that question for us. And again, a lot of this information would be available also on our website, and we'll drop that in the chat so you can take a look at it too. A question that is about, again, submitting manuscripts. What is the sort of time frame once a manuscript is submitted or is accepted? What is the time frame to actual publication? And then also, if you could talk about at the same time, sort of what is the state of the manuscript? Does it have to be completely finished? Do you look at something that's more in progress? And what if someone has self-published a manuscript before? Can they publish a new edition with Atmosphere?
It's a
Sorry,
great
that's a lot of
question.
questions all at
No,
once.
it's a great series of questions. So one of the things I'll say is that you don't have to have put the final period on your last chapter or the last exclamation point into your book of poems in order to send it over, right? We get tons of projects where someone says, here's the first 20 poems on what I got written. Here's the first 50 pages of what I've got written. And look, that's a great sample for us to get a sense of what you're doing. And it allows us to have a longer conversation with you about where the work's going to go. And if it's something we're interested in, maybe we get that book under contract, right? There's definite possibilities, right? Even if you are not at the very final stage of publication. In terms of our process, this is one of the big selling points for not doing self-publishing and not doing traditional publishing. Instead, working with a flexible hybrid publisher that's going to have expertise, right? So to publish with a traditional publisher, you're looking at a year plus, right? And a year is very optimistic. I talk to people often who have gotten their book under contract and it's year 3 and nothing's happened, right? How disappointing is that? Because you've got so many readers who are so excited to hear about your work, and the book's not just not coming out. Maybe they're not even getting back to you, and you're worried the press is going to fold. It's a very realistic possibility, unfortunately, right? And in terms of self-publishing, you are often it's like you're in, you're out, the book's out there, and there's no marketing lead up, and there's no marketing follow through, and you're left with just kind of what's out there, and you're having to be the guy pushing it all by yourself or the gal pushing it all by yourself, right? So with Atmosphere, it's a 4 to 6 month process, right? And one of the wonderful things is that we always move at the author's pace. So if you're really responsive, you're getting back to us right away, and we're moving forward, we're going to be rolling right along, right? Or alternatively, if your life gets really busy and you need some time to get things done yourself, that's okay too, right? You have that opportunity, right? We had an Ivy League professor who needed his book out right away because he had a competitor who was hot on his heels. We had a Swiss ambassador who needed to get his book out there, but he wasn't in that big of a hurry, and it turns out he had some big responsibilities. And we said, that's fine, we'll get that out when we're ready, right? And we moved at his pace, right? So one of the wonderful things is we get to move at the author's pace, and in doing so, you can have a realistic expectation that you won't have to wait years and years for your book to come out. We're going to work with you to get that into the world, and in a meaningful way, not just shoved on Amazon somewhere in some corner where nobody's going to see it, right? So you can have big goals and expect that we're going to help you work towards them, which is huge.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for answering all of those questions at once. I'm looking at our time, and how this has gone by so quickly. There's one more question that I'd love to ask you, Kyle, if you have a moment. And then we'll keep the conversation going via email and through our phone calls and everything. So if someone wants to take the next step with their manuscript, and that's whether they are completely new to Atmosphere, or perhaps they've already had some conversations with you already and have a contract on offer, what are the next steps, Kyle?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so you're absolutely right. One of the wonderful things about this webinar is we get to talk to so many people all at the same time. So it's perfectly possible that a lot of you already have offers from Atmosphere, contract offers. First of all, congratulations. That is incredibly huge in terms of import, right? And so with folks who are in that situation, one of the things that you can do is we've actually sent you instructions about how to move forward. Maybe you still have questions. That's okay. Send them over to me, right? You One of the things that we're going to post in the bottom is a contact email for me as an editor, right? And again, this is part of a feature of transparency, is that you can get a hold of me and ask me questions, right? If you are someone who's completely new to Atmosphere, right, then you have another opportunity, which is let's start a conversation about your book, right? You're interested in getting it published. If you want to see it out in 2023, how crazy exciting would that be, right? How delighted would your family members and your friends and all sorts of readers who you've never met be to see your book in the world? And so there's going to be a link that I believe Cam has just posted where you can schedule a time to chat with me about your book, to send it over, send a sample, right? And then thirdly, if you're looking for more information, one of the things you can do is you can check out our website, right? And we have all sorts of amazing links and ideas, and you can get to know our team. You can check everything out, right? And kind of get a sense of what's going on there. But one of the easiest things to do is just to reach out. Let's have a conversation, just like we're having here. But we can continue it on in a more personal way where we talk about your manuscript in particular.
Oh, thank you so much, Kyle. This went by so quickly. Oh my gosh, we could talk for another hour, but thank you to Dr. Kyle McCord for sharing your experience, your time, your wisdom today. And thank you again to everyone for being here and for all of your thoughtful questions. If you're a writer looking for a rewarding and meaningful publishing experience, please check out the links in the chat and visit us at atmospherepress.com. There you can submit your manuscript, sign up for our email newsletter, you can browse our new and forthcoming releases, meet the humans behind Atmosphere Press, see who you'll work with, and also check out our authors and read about their publishing journeys in their own words. So with that, that's all for today. We look forward to staying in touch with all of you. And on behalf of Atmosphere Press, have a great rest of your week, everyone. Thank you and take care.